I have read this chapter countless times, and the feeling of terror and chills do not cease. This was a horrifying chapter. The build-up of destruction. The beginning of the end for Hero Society. This is a turning point for the entire series of My Hero Academia. You can say that Shigaraki has finally come into power. He is truly the supervillain of this series, and honestly, at this point, after reading this chapter, I don't think anyone can really stop him. There's no one there that can really stop him, because when we look at everything, I mean, even though we know one day Shigaraki will potentially be stopped, now is not that time. Like, there's just no way Izuku, even using 45% or even 100% of just One For All, would be enough to be able to deal with what Shigaraki is currently capable of. Honestly, I don't even think All Might would be able to fight back against what was happening within this chapter. He may have great strength. Like, example, to back up a second, if All Might was at his prime, okay, and he didn't have his limit like he did when he was fighting All For One, I think that he wouldn't be able to win without multiple quirks backing him, because even with his super strength, it wouldn't necessarily do much against just destruction. These segments of destruction just spreading through the ground, spreading through the streets, spreading through everything. It's like a disease spreading. I don't think All Might would truly be able to stop it. I could be wrong, but I don't think strength is the answer. Like, it's just, I don't think overpowered strength would be able to win against Shigaraki at this moment. You would really need to be able to use a lot of ranged attacks to bring him down, because at this point, it doesn't look like that's going to be possible either, because he now has All For One, and we don't really know what he's fully capable of, which I'll talk about in this video. I want to talk about something that I think is going to be very underappreciated. Something that many are not going to really talk about or care too much about. And that is the whole panel with Crust. His final moments within the series. And I know many are going to look at the character when they first read this chapter and going to think, who is this? Why should I care? When was he introduced? What was his name again? I know many are going to say that while reading the chapter, because when you really think about it, Crust isn't the most developed character within My Hero Academia. I mean, he has had his characterization given to him early on in chapter 185, but even then, he hasn't really had a whole lot of panel time like other characters, so it's very apparent that many wouldn't really care too much about his character, like when you look at someone like Endeavor, or Mirako, Aizawa, etc., Ryukyu. You know, even Ryukyu doesn't really have as much panel time, but even then, she still had more than Crust. So, just when you look at everything, Crust is definitely not a fully developed character. But at the same time, it doesn't stop the fact of the way he went out is truly underappreciated. I think many are not going to understand the message of what that truly meant for the series, but also what it meant for Crust as a character, Aizawa, what Shigaraki's capable of, just everything. It's a very important page, and so I want to take a few moments to actually talk about it, because it's important. It's one of the highlights of the chapter, personally, for me. There's a lot of highlights, but that was a really good page. So, Crust, he was introduced in chapter 185, and his introduction was pretty much him stating that he was an All Might supporter, an All Might fan. He wishes he was there when All Might was fighting, All For One, and, he was able to save more people. He was able to be there that day. He regretted it. He blamed himself for so many losses of life. He wishes that he could have been there, which makes a lot of sense when you think about, his personality. He had this very intense personality that was very much like All Might, but on top of that, he was someone that just wanted to save people. When we found out more about how his quirk, works, he's someone that's able to create like a hexagon-shaped shield from his body and use it to defend his allies, defend himself, but also to be offensive with it and take down Nomu, which we have seen throughout this arc. He is definitely someone with a very strong quirk. He was the number 6 hero, part of the top 10, so he definitely was not weak by any means. And so, when it was first introduced, he blamed himself. He wishes he would have been there, and maybe something different could have happened. Maybe more lives could have been saved. But now we have this moment within the chapter, which is kind of like a callback to that. He got what he wanted in the end. He technically saved a life. If Crust was not there, Aizawa would have died. Straight up. I think many don't really take a moment to factor that in, is that Crust died protecting Aizawa. And when you think about all the characters that were in that building, honestly, Aizawa is single-handedly the most important character because of just how his quirk works. His quirk literally deactivates other quirks, and as long as he stares at, villains or anybody, their quirk is deactivated. It doesn't work for everything, but it's still a very strong quirk, which has been utilized in this arc, in countless other arcs beforehand. It's a very powerful quirk, and we're all fully aware of that. So, Crust, technically, he probably saved the day. Like, not just saving Aizawa, but theoretically, a time down the road, Aizawa might save countless other lives and even be able to help others take down Shigaraki because of his quirk. So Crust, technically, even though he died, he's potentially saved hundreds upon thousands of other people in the future thanks to his noble sacrifice. And that's something that people really need to think about. But there's a lot more than that. See, when he said what he wanted to do when he was first introduced, it was words. It was just words. And we really know when it comes to My Hero Academia, people can put on a pretty image, say what they want to say, but actions speak louder than words. That's a big thing that this series wanted to show, and it's kind of something that, Stain was trying to kind of implement as well, is that just because you have a hero title doesn't mean you're a hero. You need to actually prove it. And what Crust did proved that he truly was an All Might fan, an All Might supporter, and he really did wish he was there that day to help out people. He truly did blame himself because he died with a smile on his face. And it's a very sad panel because when you look at how he dies, he puts a thumbs up, which looks very corny, but then you realize that the way he does that to Aizawa, he's like, I'm fine. Like, I know I'm dying, but it's okay. I don't regret my decision. I don't regret dying to save you. I don't regret anything. And it's a little bit sad, though, when you zoom in closely and you see a little tear on his eye, which basically represents that he is slightly afraid, and which for good reason. He's dying, and it's just sad to see the man tearing up. He's crying because he's sad, and, he puts on a brave face. He puts on a really brave face, but he dies with a tear in his eye, and it's just truly horrific to think about. But what's even sadder about all of this, though, is the realization of when he looks down, he realizes that he is dying. Now, that is a big moment right there. That panel hit real hard, because as he went to save Aizawa, he looks down and he realizes his entire lower half is just gone, and he's just like, oh. And Aizawa is just looking at him, and he just, he puts the thumbs up, and it's sad, because the man accepts it. He accepts fate. There's nothing else he really can do. He accepts it, and he tries to be brave in those final moments. And I think what hurts even more is that panel after he does the thumbs up, you see Ryukyu and Aizawa and everybody else being dragged off, and you just see how it's looking at them from a distance. That entire panel is Crust's POV. His final POV, his final thing he saw before he died was seeing them ride off. And so in his mind, before he finally crumbled into nothing, he joined the piles of ash itself, he saw them escape. So in the end, he got some closure. He realized he saved people in the end. He did his job as a hero. And if there's anyone that really is worthy of a title as a hero, it is definitely him. But there is more to this segment than just Crust, and I think many are kind of underplaying this or not really looking too deep into it to really see why it's incredibly important, and that is what Aizawa is going to think after this. Once everything is said and done. Like, we know nothing's going to be the same after this, but Aizawa is potentially getting out of this unless his quirk is stolen. The only thing that could happen at this point is I think Aizawa's quirk will be stolen, but I think he will potentially live. And the thing is that Aizawa, he tried desperately to save Crust. It's very clear if you look at the panel, his eyes are stressed and straining. He is using his quirk to the maximum. He is super stressed, and he's trying everything within his very fiber of his body to stop what Shigaraki was doing. You saw him use everything. He was desperately staring at Crust to somehow stop the destruction that was slowly destroying his body. He tried. You could just tell by Aizawa's face. And the entire page is perfect for just expressing those emotions without words. It's a really beautiful page when you think about it, and the emotions of Aizawa really is conveyed through. Like, he really felt probably powerless in that moment. He felt like he couldn't do anything. I don't think there has been any point in Aizawa's life until probably the day Shirakumo died that he's felt this powerless, because he tried everything. He has a quirk that literally is capable of stopping other quirks, but the quirk that is super powerful couldn't stop someone from dying in front of him from another quirk. And it's incredibly tragic to think about. It's sad, and I can't help but feel bad for Aizawa, because that's going to have an effect on him. That is really going to have an effect on him to make him feel like he's worthless. Like, his quirk is meaningless if you can't even save someone right there in front of him that legitimately died, and died saving him. And regardless if Crust had good intentions, he was fine with dying, it's not going to sit well with Aizawa, because his quirk, the way it works. But it's not just that as well. You also have to think about the Nomu's hand that is attached onto Aizawa's leg. I have a feeling that maybe that Nomu's hand or whatever is going to be analyzed on Aizawa to potentially help out Shirakumo, Kurogiri, and bring him back to what he once was. That could possibly happen, which could be a light at the end of the tunnel for Aizawa after a lot of darkness that will be in his mind after what has happened to Crust. That's a possibility. But okay, enough with that. Let's talk about Exless, a character that has been absolutely memed to death. Oh my goodness. I've memed on him, the community's memed on him, the man, literally, he was set up to die. It's very apparent that Exless was going to die, and he is in a similar boat as Crust. He is someone that is an underdeveloped character that died, but he had an off-screen death, but his off-screen death actually holds a lot of weight because of the things that is connected with Shigaraki, which I'll talk about in a moment. The thing is that Exless did in fact die, so that was a no-brainer. With everything that Shigaraki was already capable of, Exless was already a dead man walking. It was very clear. So that was gonna happen. So the man died, and the whole segment with Shigaraki waking up, the first thing he says is I'm cold. And you have a brief, over-the-top view of Shigaraki later on in the chapter while everything is coming down and being destroyed. You see a cape on Shigaraki. Basically, this is Horikoshi telling us that Exless is dead, but Shigaraki stole the man's cape and put it on himself to keep himself warm. Now, at first, people are just gonna have a laugh and wanting to meme on Exless even more. Holy crap, this man literally, his only purpose was to be attached to Shigaraki's design. And it's pretty messed up to think about. It's really cruel. It's whoa, that's so disrespectful. But it shows a little bit more about Shigaraki's capabilities, and that is, he has a little bit more control now. See, we've known now for a while since the My Villain Academia arc when he was fighting, Redestro, that Shigaraki was holding back. He was holding back with his quirk. He was never utilizing his full capabilities of what his quirk was able to do. He was just suppressing it subconsciously. So he was never utilizing the effect of it, transferring to objects that it touches. So example, when he touches a glove or something, it will also spread to the floor around him, etc. He was holding that back subconsciously, along with him enhancing and evolving his quirk. He was holding it back, the capabilities of it. So he did have some form of a subconscious level of control. And in this chapter, it pretty much just downright shows us that Shigaraki was able to get rid of Exless, but not destroy the cape that was on him and put it on himself. That says enough about Shigaraki's capabilities, that Shigaraki legitimately, he is able to control what he destroys and what he doesn't in a certain radius and stop it on a certain object, for instance, not destroying the cape of Exless. So that's a very big detail that people need to factor in, is that he is now capable of destroying what he wants to destroy and not things at random. So maybe he actually could put all fingers on something with all 5 fingers without destroying something. He doesn't need to do what he does with his fingers and all that. He can actually touch things without destroying it because he can actually have full control. But let's go a little bit further. Since we know that he obviously has control now, how much control does he have? That is a question, because at the beginning of the chapter, you see the destruction spreading throughout the lab and all that, and you see how the doctor notices it, and he starts to get very happy. Even though potentially he was about to die, he is saved in the end, but even then, the cracks, everything we have seen thus far from the story, is that Shigaraki's quirk does not distinguish between friend or foe. It is a AoE ability that could potentially hurt his allies. And that has been one of the biggest weaknesses of his quirk. But it's possible, because of his new control, that maybe he can select who he wants to destroy and who he doesn't. Or maybe he didn't care about the Doctor in the first place. And here's the thing about that. We know Shigaraki isn't heartless. He's not a heartless man. We know this because we know he has a connection with, the League of Villains. We know this. He cares about them. He looks at them like family. So he is not an evil man just to be evil. He's not a villain to be a villain. He has his own ideals. He is a good person in his own way. His twisted way, he is a good person. So it makes me wonder, does he really care so little for the Doctor? Did he know the Doctor was going to be okay? Or somehow was he going to not be able to destroy the Doctor and the Doctor was going to be a-okay? There's so many things I was wondering about that. But okay, so with that, let's talk about the fleeing situation. So a lot of people, everybody within the hospital, honestly the entire town, is just legitimately getting up and running, and so many people are just left and right crumbling away into ash. Literally, Shigaraki is just Thanos snapping people. That's literally what he is doing within this chapter, and you could tell that nothing is going to be the same after this. There's just no way that any of these heroes currently there can stand up to him because of just what we have seen demonstrated already within this chapter. And even if you have the ability from long range to stay up in the air, it doesn't stop the part where Shigaraki now has All for One, and he has range-based quirks a part of him now. So it's not just, destruction, but he potentially can fly. He can potentially shoot fireballs out of his hands, lightning, whatever. He has range now. It's not just destruction. So even one of his biggest weaknesses, which was in the past, just being able to fly, that's probably no longer his weakness. So even someone like Endeavor really couldn't do much against someone like Shigaraki. And even then, most likely Shigaraki could potentially destroy Endeavor's flames because we've seen what he did with Redestro. So I don't think anyone is currently there capable of stopping Shigaraki. So the thing about the fleeing, though, is we have a brief scene with Pixie Bob. And Pixie Bob is definitely one of those characters that has been around for a while, and definitely there is quite a following behind them. When it comes to, the Wild Wild Pussycats, we know that a lot of people love them. A lot of people in the community love their characters. They've been a wonderful addition to the story since they were introduced in the anime and the manga, and just seeing what Pixie Bob did is scary for a lot of reasons. And when I looked into her quirk called Earthflow, it scared me even more because her quirk isn't capable of stopping Shigaraki. And let me explain. We see Pixie Bob jump into destruction following them, and the destruction was obviously going to catch up. They were going to die regardless. But Pixie Bob jumps in and uses her Earthflow to use the destruction that Shigaraki is causing against the destruction to kind of push it back. And to kind of re-explain how Pixie Bob's quirk works, she's able to manipulate dirt. She's able to manipulate the ground. Not necessarily concrete, or, all that type of stuff. She actually manipulates dirt, ground, and she can make, dirt golems, or sand golems, etc. So, what she was doing within this chapter was using Shigaraki's dust, the dirt and everything he's crumbling. She was using that to her advantage, but you could see clearly that the destruction was even going through the dirt. It was going through the dust and everything, destroying through it completely. So even her using her quirk wasn't able to stop it. And it was even going through dirt and dust, etc., just destroying it. And here's the thing about that, is that the destruction, since it's able to spread, with her lifting it up and basically maneuvering it away or pushing it up, etc., the particles of destruction could potentially scatter to other places and start destroying even more, and potentially got on Pixie Bob. I really do think that Pixie Bob potentially died within this chapter. I really do think that she probably did. To protect everyone there, she probably died, because she was too close. When you look at just the destruction of what was going on behind them and how she jumped in towards it, she was way too close to it to necessarily stop what was going on. I just do not think that Pixie is potentially going to be alive. And if she is alive, she's going to be maimed. She's going to be losing a leg, arms, or whatever. She is not going to be whole if she does somehow survive. I'd be very shocked if she lives, but I just I really don't, because of just the way that entire part was set up within the chapter. But okay, let's talk about Izuku and his capabilities, what he is potentially going to be doing in these upcoming chapters. Izuku uses 45%. Now, I know everybody, when they first read this chapter, they're going to say, whoa, that's a big jump. Like, the man went from, like, 20% to 45%. Like, that's a big jump. And as a reminder, there has been a recent time skip with everybody a part of UA pretty much training with Endeavor Squad and all that, trying to get better, get into shape for what is currently happening within this arc. So there has been a time skip. We already know this, and we know Izuku has slowly been trying to get better with, One for All. So it's not really a stretch to see Izuku improve to such an extent, but to make it a little bit better for people who can still accept it easier, Izuku didn't use full cow. He didn't do full body One for All. He actually just used an air shot with his legs to hit back the destruction that Shigaraki was causing. So, as a reminder, if you forgot, as you know, legs can output a lot more strength than your arms. This was already discussed a long time ago, which is why Izuku adapted to using his legs to fight, was that if you could only, let's say, use 20% in your arms, your legs potentially could use maybe 25 to 30%, because your legs technically are a lot stronger, they have a lot more muscle, they have to hold up your entire body and support you, so Izuku's legs are definitely stronger than his arms. They're able to take a lot more force, a lot more power, so him being able to utilize his legs to be able to output 45% isn't really a stretch. But that's the thing, though, just as a reminder of why he's probably able to use that is because of that reason. Now, let's get into the big topic of discussion, which is, the power scaling, Izuku fighting Shigaraki, etc. I know many are going to say, with Shigaraki demonstrating his strength, there's just the power scaling. It's like power creep coming on, and I do understand why some would say that, like why some would say power creep, it's getting ridiculous, etc. But at this point, it makes sense for Shigaraki to be this strong. It didn't just come out of nowhere. Literally, the entire story is not just Izuku, it's him building up as a villain, and he finally got into the realms of power like, One for All. Now he's all for one, and he's able to actually use, his quirk to the fullest. It's always been strong. It's been demonstrated to be strong. So, it's not really something that came out of nowhere. Now, at this point, I do think that even someone like All Might would have a struggle against Shigaraki. I don't really think All Might would have an easy fight against the man. Like, I think if All Might was Prime, he might be able to do something, but I don't think even Prime All Might would come out of the fight of what Shigaraki's currently capable of unscathed. I think he would potentially get damaged as well, just because of how scary Shigaraki's quirk is. So, I think that there is definitely a lot of strength he is capable of, and I do think that it's going to call into question how useful every other character is going to be, because at this point, who's really going to be able to stop someone like Shigaraki? But we got to think about the theme of what Horikoshi himself has been setting up within the story, is that with All Might being gone, nobody can replace him. Not even Izuku can replace what All Might was. And because of that, most likely all the heroes are going to have to band together to stand up against the evil itself. And I feel like it's going to be about the amount of heroes fighting back at once to be able to stop the monster that is Shigaraki. So I think that even though they're not going to be as strong as him, it's going to be so many people fighting at once to bring him down with the help of Izuku as well. That's what I think is potentially going to happen. But okay. With all that, though, I think that this chapter is just straight up, it's an amazing chapter. Like, I had chills. It was a chapter. I did not expect to see as much, like, carnage and destruction within this chapter as I did. And we gotta remember, Gagan is popping up, so that's another whole can of worms that's going to be popping up very soon. So if you think it's bad now with Shigaraki doing what he's doing, Gigan's going to appear, and ooh, that's not going to be good. But okay, I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or not wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.